explain something, either a fandom, a hobby, whatever. Today we are explaining a phrase, and gosh, I don't know how to really start this, but let's talk about the Mandela effect. And it all starts with Nelson Mandela, even though it has very little to do with him. So let's start at the beginning. Nelson Mandela was a South African political activist who was imprisoned for 27 years and then became president of South Africa. However, some people, actually a lot of people, have these memories of him actually dying while in prison. These memories are absolutely fake, and untrue because he went on to become the president of South Africa. So how could they remember him dying while in prison? There are many people that have shared stories about remembering seeing his widow on television and the exact details of his death. This was the first incident to really gain traction where a lot of people misremembered something. That a massive amount of people all thought that the past was something different than it really was. And someone actually coined the term Mandela effect. It was a paranormal consultant named Fiona Broome that coined this term. Another incident more recently that caused people to massively misremember something was the book series The Berenstain Bears. Now, I read these books when I was a kid, and I remember vividly that it was Berenstein, or Stein, E-I-N. But it turns out that it's actually spelled A-I-N. Berenstain Bears? And a lot of people misremember that. Even though it was a book that you read constantly and you were constantly looking at, everyone misremembers. And here's one more example just to settle this. Let's talk about Monopoly. Let's talk about the Monopoly Man, Uncle Pennybags. That's such a weird name. If you were asked to describe him, and someone asked me, can you describe the Monopoly Man? And I said, yeah, he has a top hat and like a monocle. And nope, he does not have a monocle. So the real Monopoly Man does not have a monocle. Maybe we're getting that mixed up with the peanut guy. I don't know. But that's something that a lot of people say, no, he has a monocle. No, he doesn't. So all of those things are the Mandela effect. Why are we misremembering something so simple? Now this is where it gets a little strange. And this is where people start to figure out, well, why is this happening? Why do people misremember? And it comes down to alternate realities. That at some point there, let me break down what alternate realities are. This is where at every decision point, for every person, for every action ever done, there is a new universe created, a new reality, where there's a reality where my life is exactly the same, but for lunch I went and got McDonald's instead of Burger King or whatever. That all of these little choices split. So there are drastically different realities where Germany won World War II. There's different realities where the wheel was never invented, or dinosaurs were not killed by the volcano or comet or whatever killed them. There are different realities for every single decision point. So people believe that this misremembering is where we bump up against another reality and maybe something crosses over, or some of our memories are different, or maybe we're not in the reality that we're supposed to be. That I remember Nelson Mandela dying, and maybe that's because in my reality he did. And now for some reason I'm here in a reality where he did not die and he went on to become president. What does that mean? There is no clear explanation for how this is happening. There is no answer for, well, here's why you remember things from other realities. Here's why you're not in the reality that you're supposed to be. But people do believe that these coincidences are more than just coincidences. That all of us misremember something because it was true for us. That maybe that's the way it was, and now it's not. But there is no clear answer as to why. So that is what the Mandela effect is. Now there's a much simpler explanation that the more logical of you might buy into. And that is the fact that we just misremember. And we simply go along with things that we are easily persuaded. So imagine this. If someone went up to you and they showed you the cover of the Berenstain Bears and they said, when I was a kid, I remember that being spelled differently. You weren't thinking about this. You weren't really paying much attention to this. You didn't really look at how that was spelled. So now you say, was it? I kind of remember that too. Even though you don't. So there is just this go along with it nature, or you don't have those memories, so you fill in the blanks. Someone says, the Monopoly Man always had a monocle. and you're like, yep, that is now the way that I remember him, because you didn't really have much of a memory about him before. So there's just this notion that it just happens that people say, oh yeah, and they kind of go along with it. That's a much easier to buy explanation than alternate realities. So, what do you think? Is there something that you remember vividly that was not true? And did you share this experience with anyone? Have you ever had one of these Mandela effect moments of your own? Any of these examples, did you remember it being spelled Berenstein Bears? Do you remember Uncle Pennybags having a monocle? Do you remember Nelson Mandela dying? Do you remember any of these things? So down in the comments, I want you to contribute, talk about the Mandela effect, what that means, and give me suggestions for other weird things like this that you want us to explain, because this is really interesting and kind of a new direction for us here, but I like it.
The real world ended in 2012. Our reality was destroyed or altered that year, and we've been living in a simulation ever since. The theory ties into the Mayan calendar, which marked 2012 as the end of an era, and many believe this date signified a metaphysical shift rather than a physical apocalypse. One version posits that CERN's discovery of the Higgs boson tore a hole in reality, forcing our consciousness into a simulated world to avoid total collapse. The Mandela effect is used as evidence of glitches in this simulation, as people recall historical details differently. This, combined with déjà vu and an increasing number of timeline anomalies, suggests our reality is malfunctioning. Proponents argue that post-2012 events feel surreal, with political cycles repeating and global chaos escalating. Some claim dreams and waking life have become blurred due to flaws in the simulation. Others point to advances in quantum physics as evidence that we shifted into a parallel universe after 2012, subtly different from the original.
This has been a Pinguinati production. If you'd like to support the channel, links are in the description.